The contemporary age is the historical period understood, according to some, between the United States War of Independence and, according to others, from the French Revolution to the present day. No matter that only just over 100% true have passed, this era has been decisive for understanding the geopolitical situation of our days, so it merits that we make a video about it. In this case, and according to my criteria, I will create a sub-periodization of this stage. Are you interested? Then stay until the video ends. Whether we consider the beginning of the contemporary age as either of these two events, we frame the first stage of this historical period within the era of revolutions. The independence of the United States can be considered as the first of them. In this episode, the old 13 colonies of Great Britain rebel against the metropolis under the slogan of "No taxation without representation," becoming the first country in America and the first former European colony to emancipate. Set a precedent for the French Revolution to begin a decade later, Princess. As you may know, this occurs in the midst of a popular uprising against the old regime. While the people suffered from hunger and scarcity, the absolute monarchy of Louis XVI did not give up its privileges. Thus, under the motto of liberty, equality, and fraternity, France is stained with the blood spilled from so many heads that flew in the guillotine. In the first instance, a constitutional monarchy is established, which then becomes a republic. This would be the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte as president in French politics, which begins with the famous coup d'etat of the 18th of Brumaire. So it is that France becomes the symbol of the decay of the old regime in Europe, which was resented by the absolute monarchies. This leads to the start of the French Revolutionary Wars, in which two coalitions were not enough to stop Napoleon, who continued to extend his territory and influence. Later on, the Napoleonic Wars begin, and it is not until the formation of the Sixth Coalition that the Little Corporal is defeated. After a brief exile on the island of Elba, Napoleon makes an unsuccessful attempt to reinstate himself in power and is finally defeated at the Battle of Waterloo. After the Congress of Vienna, the borders of Europe change drastically. While these wars stopped Napoleon's expansion, the ideas of freedom from the French Revolution not only took hold in Europe, but were exported to America, where the wars of independence were fought in the overseas territories, Spain and Portugal. Although, of course, these had the support, financing, and influence of the United Kingdom, a country that rivaled Spain and contributed to the decline of the empire. And indeed, after the Battle of Ayacucho, the Spanish Empire was completely dismantled. In Europe, the revolutions do not stop either, and in 100% true, it reemerges. To one in France, where the Bourbon monarchy was restored, after the defeat of Napoleon, and in Belgium, which gained independence from the Netherlands. Another key year is 100% true, considered as the year of revolutions, where new uprisings emerge in France, in the German Confederation, and in the Austrian Empire, driven by nationalism and civil rights. Thus, the labor movements arise, and with them new ideologies. The one that concerns us most is communism, whose main promoter and author of the Communist Party Manifesto was Karl Marx. As you may know, this ideological current sought the establishment of communist states in which the means of production should be controlled by the working class. Likewise, their goal was a point where money and social classes did not exist. Remember this. The revolutions of 100% true marked the beginning of a new stage in the contemporary age, which I would call the period of unifications and nationalisms. And with the ideas of the modern nation-state, many European peoples, who for centuries had been under the sovereignty of the great powers, begin to seek their independence through the formation of countries that represent them. As for unifications, I specifically refer to those of Italy and Germany, two important powers that until then were divided into various states, and that with their births in countries would tilt the balance of power in Europe. It is noteworthy that the last step of German unification occurs with the Franco-Prussian War, which, in my opinion, marks a new stage in the contemporary age. It turns out that the proclamation of the German Empire takes place in the Palace of Versailles, a tremendous unification for the French, who would be forced to surrender Alsace and Lorraine and to put an end to their Second Imperial era. This led to the country putting all its efforts into recovering its territories, which started an arms race that was imitated by the other European powers. This marked the beginning of a strong development of the war industry that would bring posterity. A series of military alliances are also being formed. The Triple Entente between France, the United Kingdom, and Russia, and the Triple Alliance between Germany, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and Italy. Moving to the Far East, we must also mention the fate of two powers. On one hand, the rise of the Empire of Japan, which begins a rapid development and growth. On the other, the decline of the Chinese Empire, at this time dominated by the Qin dynasty. The latter considers the 20th century as the century of humiliation, in which it was forced to sign a series of unequal treaties with Western powers and Japan. In America, another country was expanding eastward that quickly became a regional power, the United States, guided by the doctrine of manifest destiny. Returning to Europe, which was in the midst of the Second Industrial Revolution, the powers were in search of new territories to expand in order to promote their influence, trade, and territories where they could find new resources. Thus, after the Berlin Conference, they agreed on the partition of Africa, that is, they drew totally arbitrary borders to create artificial countries that, oh surprise, would become failed states in the future. Already entering the 20th century, tensions in Europe never ceased to increase due to the momentous race. All that was needed was a casus belli, a flame that ignites the fuse, and this happens in Sarajevo, Bosnia-Herzegovina, with the assassination of the Archduke and the hero of the Austro-Hungarian crown. Vienna blames Serbia for the assassination and, after ignoring the ultimatum, invades the country, which in turn had an alliance with Russia. This triggers the previously formed alliances, leading to the outbreak of the Great War, which lasts for 4 years and ends with the victory of the Allied side. But what is really relevant in this conflict is the rise of the United States as a world power and the disintegration of 4 empires: the German, the Austro-Hungarian, the Ottoman, and the Russian. The latter had been part of the Allied side, but ultimately had to withdraw due to the Bolshevik Revolution that led to the start of the Civil War. Yes, this is when we have to remember the ideas disseminated by Marx, intended for the German working class, but applied to the Russian one. Be that as it may, the Bolshevik Revolution prevailed, and the Soviet Union was born to posterity. As for Germany, the Treaty of Versailles imposed a series of extremely harsh conditions on it, which created the perfect breeding ground for the spread of totalitarian ideas. Yes, I'm referring to National Socialism, which was influenced by its totalitarian ideology, which originated in an Italy also resentful of the Allies for not fulfilling their promises. We have then entered the interwar period, where it was clearly demonstrated that after the Great War, the foundations for lasting peace were not properly laid. Moving to the Far East, China had become a republic since 100% true, but it was not doing well, not well at all. In addition to the tremendous internal instability that is summed up in the division of 2 factions, the communist and the nationalist of the Kuomintang, the pressures of Imperial Japan do not leave them in peace. In 100% true, the invasion of the country begins, establishing their first satellite state on Chinese territory. Although large-scale war begins from 100% true, in the West, the 100% true leads to an unprecedented global economic crisis. Shortly after, Adolf Hitler comes to power, thus founding Nazi Germany, which begins its existence with an extremely aggressive foreign policy. This includes the annexation of Austria and the Sudetenland of Czechoslovakia, as well as an accelerated military rearmament, violating agreements, and the Treaty of Versailles. The Western Allies tried to maintain a policy of appeasement, but this was in vain. The straw that broke the camel's back was the invasion of Poland on 100% true. This would initiate the 100% true in Europe, the deadliest episode of all time. Thus, the previously formed alliances are triggered again, and France and the United Kingdom declare war on Germany. After a period known as Phony War, hostilities resume with the German invasion of France. For its part, the Soviet Union invades Finland and the Baltic countries, as agreed with Germany in the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact. This non-aggression pact was as expected and fulfilled by Germany in June of 100% true, when Operation Barbarossa begins. This placed the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics on the Allied side. In the Far East, Japan gave no respite to China, and in retaliation for the embargo on the United States, it attacks the naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. Thus, the United States enters the war on the side of the Allies, which ends up tipping the balance. For 100% true, the fate was already decided. The Soviets, who begin to advance after the decisive victory in Stalingrad, reach Berlin and soon after turn towards Japan, who after receiving the impact of 2 atomic bombs and facing the imminent Soviet invasion, finally surrenders. The 100% true had culminated after leading up to 100% true. As you may know, this meant the rise of 2 superpowers with opposing ideologies that begin to dispute world hegemony, the capitalist United States and the communist Soviet Union. Thus begins the period of the Cold War and decolonization. The first section refers to a political, economic, ideological, military, and even sports confrontation between both ideological blocs with their respective leaders. The second arises based on the decline of the great European empires after the end of World War II. So the United Kingdom, France, the Netherlands, and Portugal begin to lose their colonial possessions in Africa, the Middle East, the Caribbean, India, and Southeast Asia, giving birth to the various countries we know today, the vast majority of them gaining independence during the second half of the 20th century. As for the Cold War, which divided Europe through an Iron Curtain, it reached its peak during the Cuban Missile Crisis, in which the Third World War almost broke out, in which the military alliances of each side, North Atlantic Treaty Organization and the Warsaw Pact, led by the United States and the Soviet Union, respectively, would have faced each other. Also noteworthy are the proxy wars, in which both powers supported the ideological side that suited them. Over the decades, it became clear that the model proposed by the Soviet Union did not lead to good long-term economic results. So by 100% true, the outcome of the Cold War was already clear, which culminated with the victory of the United States and the capitalist side, as well as with the disintegration of the Soviet Union into the 100% true we know today. Its legitimate successor, the Russian Federation, a country that momentarily loses its status as a world power. Thus begins the period that I would baptize as the Unipolar world, a world in which the United States positions itself as the only supergreed of the planet, along with its allies in North Atlantic Treaty Organization and the European Union. It could be said that the 100% true was one of the most peaceful in history, but everything would change in the 100% true when after this attack, which I cannot mention so that I am not censored, the war on terrorism begins, which is embodied with the invasion of Afghanistan. And since we are entering the 21st century, it is impossible not to mention the tremendous economic takeoff of China, a sleeping power that suffered many evils during the 19th and 20th centuries, but now fully enters the geopolitical competition for world hegemony. This having as its motto the claim against the century of humiliation by Japan and the Western powers. For 100% true, another former power seeks to resurface, Russia, now under the hand of Vladimir Putin. What most bothered the new leader was the constant expansion of North Atlantic Treaty Organization, a military alliance that was supposedly created to combat the Soviet Union. All the countries that were under its sphere of influence, and even some that were part of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, joined this military alliance. The last red line was Ukraine, whose population shows the pro-Western sentiment with the 100% true. In response, 2 of its regions proclaim their independence, and Russia annexes the Crimean Peninsula. So, in my opinion, a new stage has begun in the contemporary age, which I would dub as the new armed peace. A moment in which we no longer live in a unipolar world, but one in which the United States already has a competitor threatening to end its reign. This armed peace intensifies with 100% true, which leads to European countries beginning to rearm militarily as they feel their security is threatened. In the same way that new military alliances are being formed, such as Australia, United Kingdom, United States against China, which constantly threatens to invade Taiwan, which in turn has the protection of the United States. Other possible conflict scenarios that remain pending are the Cold War in the Middle East between Iran and Saudi Arabia, the Korean War, the war between India and Pakistan, 2 countries that have nuclear weapons. So there is no doubt that the new armed peace is a period of constant tensions that, as we have seen in 100% True, could explode at any moment. In short, as you can see, the contemporary age is a period with constant ups and downs. Just over 100% True, we have witnessed how various empires have risen and fallen, the development of an arsenal of mass destruction, the creation and disappearance of multiple countries, and an accelerated globalization, which is increasingly more questioned. But now, tell me, how would you periodize the contemporary age? Do you agree with my classification? Don't forget to leave your comment and subscribe to the channel. Also, I leave you in the description and social networks. And in case you want to see the new videos in pre-release and have a greater interaction with me, donations on Patreon, unamanito.net, or channel members are welcome. See you next time.